Welcome to the new cyber frontier, bringing you the latest news and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's new cyber frontier.
All right, welcome to another edition of the New Cyber Frontier. I'm your host, Tim Montgomery, and today we have Mike Bauer from Faircom. Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. It's been a while since I've recorded some of these things. Usually we only do like once a month, something like that. I'm glad you got on this round. I try to do it every last Wednesday of the month, so always you got other people, please bring them on. We're always happy to interview anybody and everything. So today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the topics. I think in your arena, you got expertise that you're experiencing your software development and architecture, right? And it's primarily in the high performance of non-SQL, SQL databases, some of the IoT platforms, and legacy system modernization solutions. So we're going to focus a lot on that thing today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you look like you got a pretty good background. Tell us a little bit about some of the things you've done and some of the stuff about where Faircom actually plays roles in some of these modernization pieces.
Yeah. So Faircom has been around for 40 years. Actually, almost in November, it'll be 45 years. That'll be our 45th anniversary. So in some ways, we are a legacy product. And so we were before SQL databases were a real big thing. And of course, today we are a SQL database and a NoSQL database at the same time, because we have the pre-SQL technology and we have the SQL. And now we just added a JSON API to create a document database strategy on top of our SQL and NoSQL ISAM engine. So we have a core engine that predates most of modern technologies, and so it allows us to modernize older technologies, because the style of programming that COBOL used, or that B-tree uses, or other ISAM style databases use, that's the style we started with. So we have that foundation in our product, and so we can do things that other more recent products can't do, because we have a very powerful binary foundation. And so Faircom recruited me 5 years ago to come be their chief architect, because I have extensive experience in the NoSQL world and the SQL world. I've been an Oracle DBA, a SQL Server DBA, and I'm on the ANSI committee. Now they call it Insights for SQL. So the SQL Standardization Committee. So I'm very strong in the SQL world, but I'm also very strong in the NoSQL world, in the JSON and XML technologies. And so I brought the JSON technologies to Faircom, and we've now that's being released here in 1 month officially. It's actually already in the product, but we're releasing it officially to the world, a new JSON database that's also SQL and ISAM under the hood. And it gives you the ability to do things that no other database can do, because we expose our engine in all three different APIs, but it's the same data. No matter how you get the data, it's the same data in the engine. So that means you can put the data in through ISAM or through COBOL or through B-tree, and you can query the data with SQL, or you can query the data with JSON as a JSON database like Mongo or Couchbase. So it's a same data, multiple API system that there's nearly nothing like it on the market. And so when we did about 15 years ago, we discovered that, well, our core ISAM engine is very similar to how COBOL works. Yeah. So we decided, because COBOL is a programming language, but it built into the language is this file handler that just opens files, writes records to files, reads records from files, filters records in files. That whole embedding of the file management was in the language. And so that we learned that we could put our entire product underneath the COBOL system. and COBOL wouldn't even know the difference because we would become the file handler for COBOL. And what we did is by replacing COBOL's outdated file management capabilities,
Mhm.
without rewriting a line of COBOL code, you can modernize a COBOL app. It's
Well,
actually that simple.
that's interesting.
And no one else does that. People say, well, when we modernize COBOL, let's go replace the language, or let's go throw a SQL database under COBOL. But
Right.
SQL can't do it. SQL has so much overhead in all of its queries that it can't perform well. But we don't. We have the lower level ISAM engine, which is very lean and mean and works just like COBOL does. So we perform like COBOL, but then we still have SQL. We still have the JSON in addition. So now you can take your COBOL app, migrate your data into our product underneath COBOL. Your COBOL code stays the same. And now Java apps or Node.js apps
Yeah.
or anything, any modern application can go and read and write the same data that the COBOL app is reading and writing at the same time with no data integrity problems, with locking, everything working perfectly. Um, so there is nothing like this on the market that can do this for COBOL. It regenerates COBOL. It makes COBOL modern
Yeah.
by
You're talking about legacy systems.
instantaneously.
Yeah. Yeah. COBOL's been out there a while, hasn't it?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It predates the Faircom technology.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
At the beginning with the Fortran, get into Pascal, stuff like that.
Yeah. It predates the Pascal. And the thing with COBOL, the whole industry learned the mistake COBOL made was they embedded the record management, the database features that we call database today.
Yeah.
They embedded that into the language.
Hmm.
And then when C came along, C came after COBOL. And Faircom, by the way, is written in C. But when C came along, the Carnegie and Ritchie said, we're not going to put record management, we're not going to put IO management, we're not going to put data management in the language. We're going to separate those out because COBOL had combined those. And that opened the world up to the world of having databases and choosing your own data technology.
Yeah, it's pairing legacy of old information. Because I know in the world we live in, there's so much information, and we get into these ideas of what legacy systems are. So the concept of the data being actually embedded in something, it can't just work anymore. That's a construct that doesn't work for today's dynamics in today's coding.
Yeah,
Way we use information entirely in the way the dynamics are played out into the information systems. So
totally. And so that's why Faircom actually is a legitimate modernization solution for COBOL, because all of a sudden now the database is separate from the COBOL application, even though from COBOL's perspective, it's just a file handler doing the COBOL thing, but the database is truly independent. And now you have other APIs coming into the database like every other database does. And you have client server applications written in Java or C# or Node.js talking to the same data the COBOL app's talking to. And now you can do data warehousing on your data. You can get the data out to the cloud. You can do machine learning. All the things you want to do with it is available because we freed the data from COBOL. And COBOL didn't even know what happened. COBOL has no clue.
it just plays right along with the rest of it. So
Yeah.
sounds cool.
Yeah. That's why we call it ready to go, RTG, because the COBOL
Yeah.
app doesn't change a line of code. Which is a big deal because we have a lot of major financial institutions using our product in COBOL applications, and they have millions of lines of COBOL code. Their whole business runs on that code, and there's nothing wrong with COBOL programming logic. It's
Right.
just programming logic. So they're not going to rewrite that code. They can't rewrite that code. Their business would go out of business if they rewrote the code.
I know
So
the time it would take to translate the code and rewrite some of the foundations
oh,
for the. I'm sure that their systems are built on something that's been there, as you would say, legacy for a
yeah,
long time, built on those types of triage. So yeah, so
yeah.
you can talk a little bit about the finance industry. Is that primarily the industry that Faircom and you guys are targeting market wise? What else? I mean, the healthcare industry's got some of the same issues going on. So, I mean, where does Faircom come in when it comes to those types of industries?
Yeah, Faircom has 4 products, and the COBOL modernization one is mostly financial
Mhm.
because that industry still uses COBOL like crazy. the financial industry was the first industry really to write programs. And so they jumped right into the COBOL and wrote tons of stuff. Medical came later. And when they started automating their systems, and Faircom is in medical devices. Our database product, which is part of our COBOL solution, is also an independent product. So we sell it's called Faircom DB. It's an enterprise class database, but what's different about it is you take the entire power of like an Oracle enterprise database or SQL Server or Postgres, and you take that and you can embed it inside your application. You
Yeah.
can't do that with SQL Server or Postgres or Oracle. You can't embed that in an app. Well, we can, because we write portable C code. We have our whole database boiled down to being either an executable or a dynamic link library that you can embed inside your app. So you can link your database right into your app. So we have medical devices from like Henry Schein, for example. In dental offices, we also have and my mind went blank on the medical device company. They do optometry devices, and they embed us directly inside their hardware. And
Yeah.
so you have an enterprise class database engine running inside a medical device. And then the device can collect data, it can do all of its logic with the software running in the device.
Yeah.
And so we have a lot of that embedding our product inside in our database, right inside of another application. So we have a lot of customers doing that, from dental offices to accounting firms to doctors' offices over in Europe. One of the biggest medical software companies embeds our database in their product. In the world, there's a backup software called Commvault.
Yeah.
Commvault backs up everything. They're the number one backup software in the entire world. Commvault embeds the Faircom database inside their backup software. We are the database that backs up every other database in the world.
That's interesting.
Isn't that crazy?
That's a good catchphrase right there. Yeah. You are the backbone of every other database in the world for backup systems.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Well, we're going to take a pause right here for our commercial break, and we'll be right back.
All right.
More of Mike Powell. So we're having this commercial break.
Blockframe Technology offers next-generation blockchain-managed trust and security. Unique non-fungible tokens are used to secure software bills of materials to provide data quality and security for every transaction in your supply chain. Deploy advanced peer-to-peer product security, scale zero trust capability to millions of IoT devices, allow vendor tracking and accountability, and rapidly reset from compromise. Unchangeable, time-sequenced blockchain data provides next-generation security using machine learning trust algorithms and audit analytics. Start securing your supply chain today by contacting Blockframe at www.blockframetech.com.
Okay, welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. I'm your host, Tim Montgomery, and today we're having Mike Power from Faircom. And before the break, we were talking a whole lot about how this non-SQL SQL type of element in the COBOL. So the legacy systems, I could see. I mean, you're right. The before the break, we talked about how this is a game changer for a lot of what legacy systems. How do companies come off those systems? How in the world, especially with finance systems being embedded and bred basically on top of that, how do you translate something into modernization for the current dynamics we have in systems and database pairing? I wanted to get some of these concepts what do you think the biggest cybersecurity issue comes into play when we talk a little bit about how this translation is happening? So, I mean, what kind of cybersecurity problems do you think it solves as far as financial industry or the healthcare industry that we were talking about?
Well, COBOL files are flat files. They're not encrypted.
Yeah.
They actually they're not on transaction control. They get corrupted all the time. Just from multiple users using them, they get corrupted. So these files are highly vulnerable because they're not protected. They're just files on the file system. Might as well be a Word document or something. And so they're just sitting there waiting for a hacker to come and get them. And so they're in plain text. So hacker just steals the file and can go read it and get the data out. And COBOL writes a lot of ASCII text, so it's easy to read the stuff. Even numbers are written in ASCII number formats. So it's just wide open. It's just begging a hacker to come steal the data. So what Faircom does when we go migrate the files out of just the file system and put them in the Faircom database, we encrypt those files. So we encrypt them at rest using AES security and standard private public keys. We have a very excellent key management system built into the product so that every file gets its own private key that's automatically generated. And then we have a master key that the application owns, and the customer owns, and they own their own master key so that they can go and access the data, but they keep that master key very safe. And so every file is encrypted with a separate private key, and the master key is a public key. So it's a very safe system that is, we use the OpenSSL library version 1.3. So it's got the latest, greatest encryption technologies. We've also FIPS enabled our product. So we use the FIPS standard. So as soon as the federal government validates the 1.3 SSL library, which they're still working out their security on that. As soon as they do that, we'll be FIPS compliant because we are on the latest technology with the FIPS FIPS version of OpenSSL implemented in our product already, because we have our banking customers require the highest level of security.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah,
there's lots of regulations that are coming down from the government as well that are starting to imply emphasis on finding those groups that don't imply the compliance measures, some of the security strategies, cybersecurity elements that have been put out. Excuse me. And so it's starting to create some real big financial issues among certain companies. So I
yeah,
can see where this type of tool actually would support getting them to compliancy measures faster than anything, without losing data and without losing, I would say, sleep, because most data loss is entirely crucial to most companies, and then safeguarding that type of data too, that they've had legacy systems. How do they maintain something like that moving forward? So I can see where this product comes into play. Can you give me a little bit of idea on a strategy wise for how Faircom comes in and kind of interrelates to, let's say, the finance industry and healthcare industry? Those two, we keep talking about those, but I'm sure there's several other industries that cybersecurity could always fit itself into. But kind of the idea of a legacy system coming on and modernization strategy that you guys kind of, generalizing what kind of modernization strategies you guys work with on these industries.
Yeah, it's easy to take the Faircom product called RTG and just put it right underneath a COBOL application. That's trivial. Then the tricky part is to migrate the files into it. And that's actually pretty easy too, because we have conversion routines. So we can convert whatever COBOL version you're using, whether it's one of the Micro Focus COBOLs or another flavor of COBOL, we've got conversion routines that can just convert all your files over. So that's pretty easy, but that's a task you have to do.
Right.
Now the files are converted running inside the Faircom engine. But the trickiest part is these guys, the administrators. They're not database administrators for COBOL. They're just system administrators. And because those files get corrupted all the time, these banks have invented massive amounts of scripts to go and copy files and replace files that are broken because they got corrupted and all this other stuff. They've created decades of practices that are really bad practices, but they were necessary practices because COBOL required it. Now, all those practices go away. So the real thing is to retrain the admin teams just to use a database system, because that's what Faircom provides under the hood, is a full-blown enterprise database. So, and one of the funniest things about retraining them is backups. So in the old school ways, you literally had to copy the files somewhere else. Those files were not under transaction control, which means if somebody's writing to the file while you're copying it, you get corrupted record. It happens all the time. So COBOL, these financial institutions are losing data all the time with corrupted records. So they have to reconcile from an old backup. Oh, this one got corrupted during the backup, so let's restore it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy. Well, Faircom is under transaction control. So when we back up our system, no data is corrupted, nothing's lost. And so that is also part of our security strategy is to encrypt the files. And then and then our backups, sorry, we encrypt the files at rest. Our backups run without corrupting data, and our backups can be encrypted. Whereas in the COBOL world, they're just copying the files to some other place, which you think about the security of that. Now you have multiple places for a hacker to go to get the raw human readable data files.
Yeah.
But with Faircom, the files are encrypted at rest, the backups are encrypted, and they don't, and data is not being corrupted. So it changes the game. You can sleep at night knowing your data is not getting corrupted anymore. It can't be hacked by hackers because it's correct. It's encrypted. Backups are the encrypted. So you have a much more secure, reliable system.
And I oftentimes, my wife works here at the house with me, but I oftentimes listen. She's an architect for healthcare facilities. That's one of the three biggest, and they do migration of images because the images are massive, right, in size. They go to archive and they end up losing, corrupted files that are across the board, several hundred to 10 to a few. Anyway, conversations that implode basically because there's no way to get that data back sometimes. And how do you work with the teams, and those types of things where legal actions imply, especially with HIPAA regulations and how that regulation functions. So there's a lot of I guess triage, I guess you could call it that, when it comes to certain things. But it would be nice to know that, the uptime, the ability to actually have something that's not going to corrupt, especially with those moving of files like that, because they can move 60,000, 600,000 at a time. There's all kinds of, the mass load of database, the size of these things, and they're 4 gig files, each one of them. So we're talking about terabytes and petabytes moving at a ratio of pretty good upkeep, but the small percentage that gets corrupted is still, it still keeps them up at night. So it's interesting to know that.
And what's happening on the COBOL side, these large financial institutions have hundreds of thousands of data files. And those files get corrupted when they're being quote unquote backed up, which is really just copying a live file being written to live off the system, which means certain records are being corrupted. That's worse than your wife's situation because the live data is being corrupted while it's being worked on. And that's not even a backup corrupting it. That's being corrupted live. So we prevent all of that, which then eliminates a whole bunch of processes trying to prevent that they work around that problem. But then in the backup side, we have the ability for you to verify the data coming to and from, so if it got corrupted in the backup side. So that's important as you're restoring data to know that, this data is good. And that's when you encrypt it, there are checks, there are checks on the data to make sure that it's still valid.
Yeah, the integrity of data.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are important pieces, especially in the cybersecurity world when we talk about availability, the integrity of something, the confidentiality, the triad, I guess you could say, right? And then the disaster recovery component of this, that's massive in itself. Because like with the scenario about the hospitals, that's a mass load of data moving around and having to be able to be recovered. And then of course you want to talk about regulations that imply financial burden, especially when it comes to fining for particular things that don't happen, which happens. Sometimes you can't pass it up. So it's great in understanding how these systems can vary from, especially with hospitals, and then talking about institutions that are financial. So,
and that's another critical piece. Disaster recovery is huge because in the COBOL world, how do you do disaster recovery? Well, you have to copy all your files over to some cloud system somewhere, and then you're going to have to try to run those files against your application running in the cloud. But you're talking about hundreds of thousands of files, petabytes of data. It's very hard to manage all that. Well, Faircom has built-in data replication. So all I have to do is configure Faircom, replicate the data to this cloud. When the data is replicated over, we ensure the integrity of the data as it's being moved over the network to the target server. So when it gets in the target server, it's not corrupted. So you know that the data in your DR solution is good data and it's running inside a database that's encrypted at rest in the target system. So you can do disaster recovery without worrying about data corruption or losing data and worrying about hackers getting to the data in some DR facility in the cloud. So it protects you in that way as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like it solves quite a few problems considering not just legacy systems.
Oh yeah.
Legacy systems. So talks about there's several layers to the cybersecurity arena that it would apply to. So it's quite interesting. So, I mean, some of these ideas that you're saying it's useful towards companies and things. So how do you get in touch? Who actually is that person, that POC that comes and talks to your company about specifics like this? Is it usually the disaster recovery guys? Is it cybersecurity professionals? Who is it that usually guys do interactions with, and how do they convey that to their, we'll say, C-suite, that concept, when we come across with this idea of what needs to be done?
Yeah. And so our target market for our COBOL market, which are COBOL applications that run outside of the mainframe. So the mainframe world has solved a lot of these problems, but the mainframe world is proprietary, closed, and super expensive. So the Faircom runs, we actually can run on a mainframe too, but you don't need us as much on the mainframe because the mainframe solved these problems.
Yeah.
So, but when you're running in a COBOL application on a server, like a Linux server or a Windows server, that's when all these issues start to happen because the Linux and Windows servers they're not robust enough to handle a COBOL application. So that's when you need a real database to run on those servers. So your security team, if you're a security person right now who has a legacy COBOL system, you absolutely need to reach out to Faircom right away because you can't secure those flat files very well. You can't encrypt them at rest. You can't prevent the the corruption of the data.
Yeah, the integrity of it.
Right, the integrity of it. And plus, if you want to modernize your system, that's really outside of security. If you want to get a JSON database on top of your COBOL data or SQL, that's a different group. That's usually your executives are going like, how can I query my data using my BI, my business intelligence system, or how can my data warehouse get the data? Those guys are the ones that come at it from that angle. But from a security perspective, you should contact Faircom immediately. We'll do a POC with you and show you how we can protect your COBOL data at rest and in transit with the best level of security that's on the market today.
Yeah, it sounds like the compliance measures apply there too as well. So when it comes down to security and stuff of that nature.
Yeah.
So yeah, any emerging trends I think is the next kind of topics we talk about with software architecture. In this particular, I mean, I guess what's the foreseen future for a specific piece of software like this one?
Well, the foreseen future is we free the COBOL app to live on. So the COBOL app is no longer a legacy system when you put a real good quality database underneath it.
Yeah.
And so now COBOL is a legitimate language again. I mean, it's always been legitimate, but the problem is it's been its data handling. And so it now brings COBOL back to life. So the future of COBOL is bright. Innovation. Now, in other markets, Faircom is also taking our database technology and we're moving into the manufacturing world with our IoT solution, which is our Faircom Edge product. And we're bringing these same technologies, not the COBOL part, but we're bringing the ability to collect data from legacy devices, which are in binary protocols, like these PLCs that have these binary protocols, and automatically collect the data and put it into our enterprise class database so that we can deliver it to IT very efficiently and deliver it to manufacturing efficiently. And so we've created a universal translation engine that can translate these old binary protocols in manufacturing, kind of legacy protocols in manufacturing, if you think of it that way, and convert them into the modern JSON format using the modern protocol of MQTT. So MQTT is a messaging queue system that is really becoming very popular right now, because it's simple. Everybody can use it. The drivers can fit inside a small little sensor, so it's easy for a developer to implement MQTT as a consumer. And so Faircom built our own MQTT broker, and we embedded our own broker that we built with our database and with the transformation engine, so that we've created a universal translator. So now we can receive data from anything, from these legacy binary protocols in manufacturing like Siemens S7 or Allen Bradley, Ethernet IP, and there's a whole bunch of these protocols, OPC UA, and we can convert those into JSON and MQTT, and we can deliver those to IT over SQL, or over our JSON database API, or over MQTT, because all the IT guys can talk MQTT too. So these are different. So basically, our goal is to free the data from the binary tyranny of legacy devices. I mean, that's what we've been doing for 45 years.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like that's future-proofing all databases at some point, right?
Yeah.
The ability to take something that's legacy and be able to baseline it and then reuse it to actually, and without missing data. I mean, that's one of the biggest, because the expense that would cost for actually retrieving data or having to translate data, things of that nature. So, well,
and it's huge, because the only reason why Faircom can do it is we have a binary database. We can store binary data directly in our database and then create views on top of it to make it look like SQL, or look like JSON, or look like anything else.
Yeah,
and look like COBOL.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's why no other database can do what we're doing, and that's what makes us different in the industry.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's awesome. Well, that's kind of all the time we have. Mike, it's always good chatting with you, and it's very fascinating to see what Faircom has actually been able to do with its database coding and those things, and come up with something that actually takes legacy systems and translates them into modern systems today. So certainly something that's needed. I do know that a lot of my past experiences was with the systems that like the national archiving agencies, and they had PDFs. PDFs were the older versions of forms and files and e-forms and you name it. And man, they had a hard time trying to figure out how to keep all that data and translate it into the newer versions of the Adobe Pro. What was it? FormFlow, JetFlow. There was all kinds of different applications that these things were creating documents in, and yeah, the formats and things were just getting, it was corrupting a lot of stuff. So that was massive across the board. So I can see how this is going to apply to especially financial systems, and especially the healthcare systems. Some of those legacy systems have been there for a very long time. So any last words?
Faircom is very customer focused. So we love to talk to customers and solve their problems. And we're an engineering first company. So you probably never heard of Faircom because we've been embedded into other systems, engineers working with engineers.
Yeah.
And so it's been recent that we're really trying to get out and get the word out, because we're like one of the best kept secrets in the industry, because people use us. We're less expensive than the big enterprise databases, but we have all the enterprise power and do things that they can't do. And so you really ought to check out the Faircom database technology, because it can modernize your system, and it can also be a leading edge brand new technology to bring into your company to do things that no one else can do, for new things, not just modernization, but actually game changing kinds of things. So we'd love to share that with you, because we're excited about this technology that we've been enhancing for 45 years, and now it's becoming something quite special.
Is it faircom.com?
Yeah, faircom.com.
Awesome.
Yeah, 2 comms in there, Faircom and .com.
Well, okay. That's all our time for this edition of New Cyber Frontier. I'm your host, Tim Montgomery, and until next round, take care and be safe.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember to get involved. Often we think that someone else will handle privacy and security in the virtual world. But you are the only one truly in command of your virtual fate. Join our mailing list so we can keep you informed of breaking news and new releases. If you have an idea, if you have a question that you would like to hear answered, or if you want to get involved with our efforts, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors' links, as they are the ones that really make this show possible. I want to thank each of you for supporting the show, and we look forward to seeing you back for the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.